Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to set up the BridalLive QuickBooks export feature. If your books are set up in accordance with GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles, then this feature is going to save you a ton of time. Before we get started, I have to issue a disclaimer though. We are not accountants. We're a group of techies that love helping bridal businesses be more successful. Our job at BridalLive is to build a great product and then show you how to use it. Your job is to determine if what we've created fits with the way your business is done, and this includes the export feature with how your books are done. If you don't possess the knowledge to make this decision, you're going to need to seek professional advice from either a CPA or a bookkeeper. We'd love to help, but we just aren't qualified to answer those tricky accounting questions. If you need someone to help out, then we've got the hookup for you. On our recommended partners page, just search the Help Center for recommended partners. You'll find a financial consultant that understands accounting and that can help you out. Okay, with that said, the focus of this video is on setting up the export. This is the first video in the series. The next video I'll show you how the data flows from BridalLive to QuickBooks. And to find that video, just search the Help Center for QuickBooks Online. But in this video, we're going to talk specifically about the setup. But before we do, let's start off by making a distinction between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. QuickBooks Desktop is installed on your computer and you access it by clicking an icon on your computer's desktop. All right? QuickBooks Online is a cloud-based app that is accessed through your internet browser and you can access it from anywhere, just like BridalLive. So if you do use QuickBooks Desktop, you don't want to set up your books with this video. You can follow the other video that we have, but you should really consider making the switch to QuickBooks Online. Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks, have made it very clear that they are going to be discontinuing the QuickBooks Desktop feature. And at some point, BridalLive is going to follow Intuit's guidance and discontinue the integration with QuickBooks Desktop as well. And making the switch is really pretty straightforward. Our financial consultant that I mentioned earlier can help you ditch the desktop and make that transition from QuickBooks Desktop very seamless. So I encourage you to reach out. The next thing you need to know is that the QuickBooks Online export is just that. It's a one-way communication, an export to QuickBooks. Information and changes made in QuickBooks do not get synced or imported into BridalLive. That's why we call it an export and not a sync. Okay, so let's get started with the good stuff. Let's take a look at how you set up QuickBooks Online export. Okay, here we are inside of BridalLive. And the thing to know here is that there is one page in BridalLive where you're going to both set up the export and execute the export. It is located underneath Settings, Integrations, QuickBooks. If you don't see the Integrations option, menu option, then you'll need to grant your user role a permission within the Integrations permission group, and that's the QuickBooks permission. And once you've got the appropriate permissions assigned to your user role, you'll just need to refresh your screen and you'll see the Integrations menu with the QuickBooks menu option inside of it. So as I mentioned before, this screen is used to both set up the export as well as execute the export. Since we're talking about QuickBooks Online, you'll want to make sure that you've toggled this switch to the QuickBooks Online setting. And once you've done this, you'll see a Connect to QuickBooks button. Clicking this button will open a new window where you're asked to sign into your QuickBooks Online account. If you have multiple companies linked to your QuickBooks Online account, you'll be asked to choose which account you'd like to have connected to BridalLive. However, if you just have one company, QuickBooks is going to ask whether you'd like to grant BridalLive permission to that one company. To grant access, just click Connect. Once you're connected, you'll be presented with our QuickBooks Online help videos, one of which you're watching right now. Now, just close this window and you'll see the button to export to QuickBooks Online, as well as all of the configuration settings. So let's go through each of these settings one by one and discuss exactly what they do. With the export start date, you're going to want to set this to a date in which you'd like BridalLive to begin exporting the data. If you set this date to April 1st, BridalLive won't export anything before that date. If you're a new business with a fresh QuickBooks account, set this field to the date that you created your BridalLive account. If you're an existing business with data already in your QuickBooks from a previous system or manual entry if you've done it that way, setting this date is extremely important. We recommend setting the date to the last day that your previous system exported data to QuickBooks. This will prevent BridalLive from exporting data that your previous system has already booked in QuickBooks. It's a great idea to pick the beginning of a month or beginning of a quarter or even the beginning of a year to start the export. The export end date works a little bit differently. You can either leave this field blank, which tells BridalLive to export everything from the start date to the current date, or if you're wanting to export a specific period of time, you'll want to enter a date into the end date field. And setting it up like this will tell BridalLive to only export data for the month of April. BridalLive uses journal entries when exporting to QuickBooks. The export type field allows you to specify whether you'd like those journal entries to be made for each day or whether you'd like them to aggregate all the data for a given date range into one journal entry. We recommend the daily option for several reasons, but mostly because it's easier for you to see the specifics for each day. However, sometimes people like to do it all in one journal entry, and if your bookkeeper or CPA is giving you that guidance, feel free to use the aggregate option. The export class feature is used only if you have multiple business locations. If you're a multi-location business, you'll have multiple BridalLive accounts, each with their own QuickBooks settings screen like this. The export class allows you to classify the data that is exported from BridalLive to the associated class in QuickBooks. And this ultimately allows you to segregate the data from each of your BridalLive accounts in QuickBooks so that you can see the profitability and various other accounting details specific to each location in QuickBooks. The next step is to select which information you'd like BridalLive to send to QuickBooks. We'll get into the specifics of how the information is exported in another video, but for now, you'll just need to know to select which data to export, and we're going to go over that right now. Receiving vouchers are created in BridalLive when you receive merchandise from a vendor. These vouchers are exported to QuickBooks as bills. Turning this on saves you from having to enter your manufacturer's invoices twice. This is probably the most time-saving element of the QuickBooks export feature itself. The other things down below can be run and exported manually by running some reports in BridalLive, but the bills themselves are really nice because it saves you from having to enter invoices twice, once in BridalLive and then again in QuickBooks. The next set of export options can really mess up your books if you don't know what you're doing, so please seek professional advice or guidance from your CPA or bookkeeper before you enable these options. All right, now that I've given that disclaimer, BridalLive gives you the option of exporting sales and sales tax. If your books are done in accordance with GAAP, where you manage customer deposits as a liability on your balance sheet, then you'll want to turn this feature on to save yourself some time doing that weekend or month-end accounting. When you enable this feature, BridalLive will create journal entries in QuickBooks that streamline the recognition of sales and sales tax when transactions are completed in BridalLive. Additionally, journal entries will be made that move funds to and from your customer deposits account when customers place their deposits and then ultimately take delivery of the merchandise. This is an extremely important topic that we talk about in the next video on how information is exported to QuickBooks Online. But for now, just know that turning this feature on will make journal entries in your QuickBooks that move funds to and from that customer deposits account from merchandise sales. If you've chosen to export sales and sales tax, you're probably going to want to export cost of goods sold as well. Enabling this option tells BridalLive to create a journal entry in QuickBooks to debit your cost of goods sold account and credit your inventory asset account when transactions are completed in BridalLive. Next, BridalLive has the option to export undeposited funds. Enabling this option will tell BridalLive to make one journal entry per payment method. So if you had, let's say, two $500 Visa payments during the day, it'll make one journal entry for $1,000. But there's more on this in that other video that I referred to earlier. Turning this option on will cause these payments to appear when you're using the Make a Deposit feature in QuickBooks. If you don't use this feature, then just keep it disabled. If you use the bank feeds in QuickBooks Online and you're already booking your deposits to your sales account, you do not want to enable this feature because it will cause double entry of your sales figures, and you definitely don't want that. The final option listed here is the detailed breakdown. This is a very advanced option that you can enable to separate the exported data into departments and also to classify the entries from being either sold from stock or special ordered. There's a lot more on this in its own separate video, but for now we would just leave this option off. Enabling the option requires a lot of setup and very meticulous organization on your side, and so we recommend leaving this off unless your accountant has advised you to turn it on and they understand exactly how it works. All right, so now that you know how to configure the export, let's run through our first export. BridalLive will only export information that has not already been exported, so you can run this over and over and over again without worrying about duplicating information in your QuickBooks account. To start the export, just click Export to QuickBooks Online. The first time you run the export, BridalLive is going to attempt to do several initial steps. The first thing it does is to try to link your QuickBooks accounts with the BridalLive account. We call these account mappings. Second, it's going to attempt to link your QuickBooks vendors with your BridalLive vendors. And you guessed it, we call these vendor mappings. BridalLive attempts to automatically link accounts and vendors by name, but if it can't find a match, it'll present you with a little Fix Issue button that will allow you to go in and select and manually map either the account or the vendor to an associated QuickBooks entity. As you can see here, BridalLive was unable to find a match for the accounts that are highlighted in red. At this point, you'll either need to select the appropriate QuickBooks account from the drop-down or jump over to QuickBooks, add the account, and then come back into BridalLive and select that account, either manually or have BridalLive automatically link it if you name it the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead over to QuickBooks and add these accounts, and I'll be right back. Okay, the missing accounts have been created, and now we'll just need to run the export again to pull in a fresh list of QuickBooks accounts. As you can see, we still have an issue, and that's because even though the accounts in QuickBooks were added, I named them slightly different. I'll just need to select the appropriate account from the drop-down and then proceed. Now that the accounts have been mapped, BridalLive will look to map the vendors. As you can see, once again, we have an issue to fix. This is because we have some vendors in BridalLive that either don't exist in QuickBooks or they exist but they have a different name. This time, BridalLive gives us the option to add the vendor into QuickBooks. This is an option we didn't have before on the accounts. Clicking this button will add the vendor using the information that you have populated in BridalLive, and it will push that information directly over to QuickBooks, making this a very simple step to proceed through. So I'm going to select a few vendors with different names and then add one here as well. Okay, so that was the hard part of the setup. Now that the issues are fixed, BridalLive will continue exporting. The next thing it does is to add an item and a customer into your QuickBooks. These are two entities that are used during the bill and undeposited funds export respectively. You'll learn a lot more about the specifics of how this works in the next video. After these two entities are added, BridalLive moves on to actually exporting the information that you've selected from the options earlier. And that's it. You've now successfully set up the QuickBooks export feature. And to learn how information is exported, watch that video I've been talking about. It's called How Information is Exported to QuickBooks Online. Just search the Help Center and you'll see it. Happy selling!